in the first decade of the 21st century, the chess world was really a beautiful and dynamic place. We had many great players like Viswanathan, Vladimir Kramnik, Veselin Topalov, Vassily Ivanchuk, Boris Gelfand, Peter Leko, Levon Aronian, very strong. Alexander Morozevich, for instance, played so many great immortal games, and I'm sorry if I forgot someone, but you can imagine how many great games we have seen this decade. And also, who was the rising star of this decade was, of course, the top GM and now the strongest player in the world. It was, of course, Magnus Carlsen. And Magnus built up his career in this decade. He was really the feared kid, the rising star, and Magnus also got many rating points, and his progress was very rapid in this decade. And for instance, one of his most important tournaments that he played in the first decade of the century was the beautiful tournament in Morelia and in Linares, in which Magnus Carlsen finished respectfully on the second place. And look at this, the tournament was really dynamic. Vichy finished on the first place, Alexander Morozevich finished on the third place, Levon Aronian fourth place, Peter Svidler, Vassily Ivanchuk, Veselin Topalov, and Peter Leko also played in this tournament. You can imagine how many great games we have seen in the Super Vant, in my opinion. Really a beautiful and epic era for us to follow for sure. So let's see now a beautiful game from the Super Vant. It was an immortal game played by Magnus Carlsen against Alexander Morozevich. Really one of the greatest games that I've seen by Magnus Carlsen. Put your seatbelts on and enjoy in this game, because Magnus Carlsen was only 17 years old, and it was really incredible how he played the game. So let's check out now the game. We have the d4 by Magnus, knight to f6 by Morozevich, c4, g6, the king's Indian, and the game transposed now into the fianchetto variation. We have bishop to g2, so both players have this dynamic bishops all over the board. So kingside castling, normal development, d6 preparation, maybe c5, e5, competing against the pawn on d4. Magnus goes with knight to f3, and now c5. Going into similar structures like in the Benoni. It's not the Benoni anymore because of a different move order, but after move d5 that will come afterwards, then of course we have this e7, d6, c5 structure, which of course makes here opportunities for black to continue the pressure. Here a6, b5, supported with the dark bishop. This is the way to go. We're trying to attack this side on the board. On the other hand, white is trying maybe to make progress with e4 and maybe e5 in the later stage of the game. Kingside castling, knight to c6, putting more pressure against the pawn, and now d5, knight to a5, hitting the pawn on c4. And the problem is now you cannot protect your pawn like this. You get a cool tactic, knight to d5, this knight is hanging. If you take it out, then of course the rook will be lost here on a1. So here, that's why knight to d2 played by Magnus, protecting it. We have now the move e5, b3. Now when the diagonal is blocked out by the pawn, now Magnus can fix the structure. Now he can go maybe with his knight to e4, maybe also later to g5. So knight to g4. Now Magnus kicks away this knight with the move h3, and now Morozevich plays knight to h6. A very interesting line, because what he's trying to do, let's flip now the board. If he would have retreated, of course, here to f6 again, then he could not push the pawn anymore. So that's why he's trying here with this sequence to play the move knight to h6, and now f5. He's going into similar structures like in the king's Indian. He's trying now to play maybe f4, maybe even e4. So with the support of the bishop, now suddenly he's trying to change his direction of the attack. He's not playing now the Benoni sort of anymore. He's now trying the cool king's Indian. But Magnus Carlsen had now really cool ideas in mind. He plays now the move knight to e4, and you can of course play something like f5 here, but then you risk ideas of knight to g5, knight to e6, also bishop to g5 first, and similar stuff. So that's why here Morozevich played f6, not allowing here Magnus Carlsen to play the move knight to g5. And now comes already the stunner of the game. Pay good attention to what Magnus Carlsen is doing here. He's playing the immortal knight to d6. Really wild stuff. And it's not the optimal move by Top Engine. This is suboptimal, but this is crazy. This is really cool. It's not a mistake or something. It's really an aggressive method here, and now black has to defend his position, and Magnus of course has to now prove his point with his tactics. So after move knight to d6, of course Morozevich has to accept the challenge. Now this other knight comes into the game. The problem is now you cannot play queen to e7. you would love, of course, to somehow protect your pawn, but then d6, you have to step back, then knight to c5, you can maybe cover with knight to f7, or you can play maybe bishop to f5, but look at this, we play b4, and suddenly the knight gets trapped. This is also one problem, a huge problem in the game. Then after something like knight to c4, for instance, queen to d5 is winning the game immediately. So, for instance, this is one of the possible tactical sequences. So that's why from knight to e4, Morozevich has to step back, so he can really never protect his pawn on c5. Magnus takes it out now, and now f5, at least trying to make some kind of a progress here on this side of the board. So we have now the move d6. Magnus is rolling with his pawn. He has still this powerful knight, and also this move d5 makes really hard this move b6 to kick away the knight, because then the rook is hanging on this long diagonal on a8. Well, we have now the move e4. Here Morozevich is trying to lock now the light for bishop. Not only that, of course, he's also attacking now the rook on a1, but now Magnus plays another beautiful follow-up, another immortal move here. He plays now the amazing d7. This is the way to go. Look what happens. Let's see, of course, the obvious line. Bishop to a1. This is not working because you get this one. Bishop to h6. If you cover yourself with bishop to g7, bishop takes g7, king to g7, knight to e6, you get a royal fork here, so it's not working. What you could do is after bishop to h6 to play rook to f7, but now we simply take out here this bishop. You can, of course, play queen to c8, get out of this mess, and also attack now the knight. But then another problem comes here. Knight to e4, after e4, we pick up here the bishop on a1. You can maybe protect your pawn here on e4, but now after queen to d4, in my opinion, this is not a good continuation anymore for black. Black is up the exchange, but it doesn't matter. I think here, well, white has 3 pawns and the bishop for the rook, which is more than a good compensation for sure here. So in one particular moment, white will simply start to roll with his pawns here with the support of the bishop. Also, there are opportunities on this side of the board. Even the obvious threat here can happen, bishop to d5, simply getting the exchange back. So in my opinion, simply lost game here for black. So you see d7, really cool move, not allowing here Morozevich to take out the rook on a1. So that's why knight to f7. Now Magnus gets back. We have queen to e7. Magnus takes out now here the bishop on c8. We have rook to c8, and now Magnus fixes his knight on a4. So we have rook from f to d8, queen to e1 hits the knight drops back, and now knight to c6, trying, of course, to get the knight here on a bit of square on d5. Knight to d4, bishop to b2. Very important move, because knight to c2 is a huge threat. You couldn't have then room to escape with your queen. In some lines the queen could be even trapped, so that's why bishop to b2, very important move. If you play knight to c2 now, then still we can escape with the queen on c1. So we have b5. So Morozevich is battling. Of course, he's trying now at least to make something with his darker bishop. We have now knight to d5 by Magnus, queen to d6, and now bishop to d4. Bishop takes d4, and now a rook to d1, attacking now the bishop and also placing the rook where already the queen is. Now the queen is also endangered on d6. So now after move bishop to e5, now comes maybe even the first real mistake here by Magnus Carlsen. He plays now the unnecessary move queen to a5, which gives here Morozevich the opportunity to go into sort of a opposite colored bishop's endgame. But what the better choice for Magnus Carlsen would have been is simply this idea: c takes b5. Probably what annoyed here Magnus Carlsen was this particular tactical sequence that could have maybe happened, but wasn't, of course, played by Magnus. Probably he was really annoyed by this possibility, because after bishop to g3, f takes g3, then this check is coming, you drop back, and now we can also take out here the piece. And it seems so that maybe black can hang on to this position. But actually, after queen to c5, rook to c5, a4, here we have a 3 versus 1 pawn majority attack, and in my opinion, with the support of the bishop e3, trading off the rooks, getting the bishop on f1, in my opinion, this is game over for black. Probably Magnus was not satisfied maybe with this potential outcome, so that's why he tried a different idea. After move bishop to e5, he tried now the move queen to a5, but this gives now Morozevich the opportunity to take out the pawn. After knight to e3, attack against the queen, you have to step back, the queens are off the board, and now after move knight to c4, we have reached now an endgame in which Magnus Carlsen is up a pawn, but as I said, these are opposite colored bishops. It's not so easy to win such endgames, because if, in my opinion, black plays now the game correctly, this should be, in my opinion, perfect draw. But of course, Magnus is the endgame goat. He was already at the age of 17, already a monster in chess endgames. So pay good attention how Magnus is now playing this amazing endgame. So first of all, after knight to e5, we have a trades of rooks. Magnus goes more active with the rook. Knight to c4, rook to c4, and Morozevich is saying, okay, I will simplify even the position further because I want to reach the fully endgame stage when we have this opposite colored bishops, and then it's probably a thematic draw. But Magnus got challenged with rook to d1. He has to cover. We have bishop to d6, e3. Magnus wants to play king to g2, and now get also somehow with his bishop into the game. So a5. Morozevich keeps, of course, his pawns on dark squares where they cannot be attacked by the light square bishop. King to g2, king to f7, and now rook to c2, covering, of course, the second rank. So king to e7, we have bishop to e2 attacking the rook, bishop to c4, again attack, and now g4 here by Magnus Carlsen. And now Morozevich makes the first maybe mistake now in the endgame stage. He plays now the move f4, and he should not even touch these pawns anymore here on this side of the board. A better choice was simply to wait, bishop to b4. But after move f4, what he got here is, after e takes f4, bishop to f4, is this problem. He got now the weak pawn on e4, and it's becoming now a tactical problem. What are you going to do? You can, of course, cover it, but now Magnus played the beautiful bishop to d3. Look at this, very wild stuff. After rook to d3, you get this one, rook takes e4, and then we take out also the bishop, and with two extra pawns, this should be a completely winning rook and pawn endgame for white. But after move bishop to d3, so that's why here Morozevich dropped back, bishop to e4, rook to d2, Magnus trades off now the rooks, and again we have an opposite color bishops endgame, but now it's a different story. Now Magnus is up 2 pawns, which can of course make now the position stretched here for black, so Magnus can attack the queen side with his king, for instance. He can get this king closer, and he can also provoke here maybe a passer that could stretch the whole defense for black. So it's now an idea to make something at least in this particular endgame. So we have king to g3, bishop to e1, king to f3. Now Magnus starts to push the pawns further. We have bishop to d6. Here Morozevich is trying somehow to attack these pawns on dark squares. We have king to d3, and now bishop to c5. We have f4, h5, and now g5, kicking away the king. The king drops back to g7. You have to protect your pawn, and now a very nice move here by Magnus Carlsen, king to c4. And Magnus makes now a huge decision. He's getting simply the king on the queen side, although he has now all of his pawns on dark squares, and they can be attacked by the dark square bishop. But now Magnus simply includes the most important piece in the endgame stage. It's of course the king. So after king bishop to d6, Magnus gets closer. Morozevich takes out now the pawn. Magnus takes also the pawn on a5. Now Morozevich also goes for this pawn. But now the problem is white is much faster. White is already pushing these pawns, and the problem I think also for Morozevich is, even if you start to push these pawns on the h file, this square is always taken by the light square bishop. So you have to play many moves in order to include maybe somehow the king into the progress of the pawn here on the h file. So in my opinion, it's much easier, of course, to play the endgame here for white. So after bishop to g5, Magnus simply pushed the pawn further. Morozevich has to now stop here the potential progress on the dark square, but now Magnus gets this king closer, and he's now trying b4, b5, and then b6, locking simply this diagonal against the dark square bishop. g5, here comes this idea. We have b5 here by Magnus Carlsen. He leaves, of course, even this bishop unprotected, because now comes this idea. We have b6, g4, Magnus pushed the pawn further. We have g3, we have the promotion. Now here Magnus Carlsen is trying another queen. We have bishop to f4, queen to f8, pinning, of course, this bishop, not allowing here to take it out, the potential new queen on b8. So here we have king to e4, and after queen to e8, in this position, Alexander Morozevich resigned, because there is this problem. You have to step back, for instance, to f3, and now we'll simply take out this pawn. We can also promote then afterwards this pawn, and this is again not a possible here continuation for black to make any draw. So great game by Magnus, by 17-year-old Magnus Carlsen. Really crazy stuff. As I said, he finished on the second place. Still, Vishy Anand was really the strongest player, but it was a new era. Magnus was rising, Magnus was getting stronger and stronger, and we know in 2013 he won his World Chess Championship title against Vishy Anand. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this Magnus Carlsen Little Immortal game. If you want to see more incredible chess games like this, check out our best chess games of all time series here on my YouTube chess channel. Here's the link. And if you want to see even wilder games, check out our best chess games by Top Engines. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos. And what do we say? Chess is the best, of course.